Hey, what's up there, YouTubers and those who may be watching this on Facebook? It's me again, Brian, aka Gamer55551, and I am back with a video review. And for this review, we're going to be taking a look at Astral, the new exclusive on the Nintendo Switch, developed by Platinum and published by Nintendo. And if you're interested in any gameplay footage of the game, I'll have a link in the description of this video. I've been a Platinum fan for a long time, ever since I played their first game, Mad World, released back in 2009 for the Nintendo Wii. Even though that game unfortunately did not become a breakout success like I would have liked it to see, though, I've been a fan of a lot of the games they've put out. Games like I mentioned, Mad World, Bayonetta, Infinite Space, even Bayonetta 2, The Wonderful 101, and so forth. So they have produced a lot of quality, fun, even over-the-top action games, although there have been cases where they've had some stinkers, though, or games not basically doing as well, like The Legend of Korra, if I'm saying the name correctly, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, and of course, the mess of, the whole situation with Star Fox Zero and the motion controls. Despite that, though, the company certainly has earned a reputation from a lot of fans. And of course, in 2017, they released a game that many believed, or according to them, saved Platinum. That was, of course, Nier Automata, a sequel to, I think, a underrated game from Square Enix, Nier, which proved to be very successful for not only Square Enix, but to Platinum as well. Not to mention, reinforce the whole statement that people who think single-player games are dead, well, you have games like that, along with Horizon Zero Dawn, Gnome, Super Mario Odyssey, and Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. That kind of reinforces why single-player games are not dead. And but as far as the relationship between Nintendo and Platinum goes, outside of Star Fox Zero, though, they had a pretty good relationship. I mean, yes, games like The Wonderful 101 didn't exactly, even though I thought that was like a hidden gem, didn't exactly lit the charts on fire or anything like that. Then again, the Wii U wasn't in a great place or anything like that. But they also produced the Nintendo exclusive Bayonetta 2, a game that Nintendo saved when it looked like no one else was willing to pick up or develop the game, when Sega decided they weren't going to, fund the project and all that stuff. And of course, we had this little gem right here, Astral, which was shown earlier this year during a Nintendo Direct, when it was showed that Platinum and Nintendo were working on a new IP. And while we may have to patiently still wait for Bayonetta 3, when I first saw the trailer for Astral, I was impressed. I mean, when I saw the fact that some of the folks who worked on Nier Automata was doing this, along with the creator of Bayonetta, the Bayonetta series involved, I was like, Yes, this is I definitely caught my attention. Well, after playing the game for a couple of weeks, including during my trip to Europe and so forth, I can honestly say this may be definitely going into some of my top 10 best Nintendo Switch games of 2019, and Astral definitely deserves to be on that list. So why don't we get started with the pros and the cons, and we'll start off first with the pros. And the first one I will have to say is the story. And I will say the story is very, very interesting. It comes off a little bit, think one part Pacific Rim, at least this is how I'm looking at it, one part Akira, one part Ghost in the Shell, and maybe to some degree one part Blade Runner. It has sort of the cyberpunk feel to it and all that stuff, and it's really good. The story has got me hooked into it and all that stuff. So from a story perspective, it is good. It's definitely good, to be exact. The next thing we're going to talk about is the graphics and the music, and boy, this is really a thing I really liked about it. The visuals of the game look really nice. I mean, yes, the Switch has its limitations. It's not as powerful as the PS4, the Xbox One, or the PC, but it amazes me how Platinum was able to add a bit of an art style to it. Definitely not only has that cyberpunk look, but it definitely has that anime feel to it, though. And the music, the music feels like I'm listening to Nier Automata music, and which certainly is not a bad thing and all that stuff. So visually, the graphics and the music are really good. And last but not least is the gameplay. And the gameplay is definitely enjoyable. You could definitely see there is a bit of DNA in the game, with a little bit of like the Wonderful 101 to a certain degree, to even one of the most obscure or like of a game released by Capcom called Chaos Legend back in 2003, if I remember the date correctly, and all that stuff. Basically, the game is you move your character, but you also have your AI partner, which is your Legion. And you use these legions for different things, ranging from attacking different chimeras, the enemies in the game, to using them to cross over certain gaps, to solving certain puzzles. So it's basically your character and the legions as well. And it runs really well, ranging from the combat part to even earlier on when you do some of the detective work in the game. You will need to use these legions to solve certain crimes, to, and do like and all the combat and so forth. So from a gameplay perspective, it's really fun and enjoyable, and I really do like what Platinum did with Astral Chain. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to get to part 2. I'm going to give you the cons. Plus, I'm going to give my thoughts on report now that we got that Spider-Man is, at least for now, back in the MCU. So we'll take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 2 of our video review of Astral Chain for the Nintendo Switch. So now that I gave you the pros, why don't we get started with the cons? And there are really only 2 cons I could think of in regards of that I have for Astral Chain, though. The first one we do want to talk about is the game's frame rate. Now, for the majority of the time, the frame rate runs perfectly fine, perfectly well. I mean, despite what's going on the screen and all that stuff, I haven't seen any problems where the frame rate took a dip or dropped or anything like that, at least as far as I'm aware of. That said, though, it is worth pointing out the game does run at 30 frames per second compared to, say, other Platinum games out there that have ran at 60 frames per second. Again, it's not a bad thing. I mean, having it run at 30 frames per second isn't necessarily bad since it's a stable 30 frames per second. But I won't deny the fact that I would have liked to see the game run at 60 frames per second, though. I mean, that would have been great if they could do that, even if they were to offer, say, like a graphical option where you could play the game at, mostly in dock, though, you could play the game at 1080p 30 frames per second or 720p 60 frames per second. And that would have been nice if they could have done that. So, yes, it's somewhat disappointing that the game is at 30 frames per second. Does it ruin the game or anything like that? No. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but it would have been nice to see the game run at 60 frames per second. And the last thing I do want to talk about is the controls in the game. Now, I mentioned earlier that the gameplay is fun and enjoyable, and I still see the controls as being fun and enjoyable to use, especially the gameplay to be exact. But I won't deny the fact that the controls, to a certain degree, have a bit of a learning curve. While not as big of a learning curve as, say, the Wonderful 101 was on the Wii U, it's still there to a certain degree, and a lot of it has to do with the legions, especially ranging from like using the chain to wrap around like enemies or certain objects, or using them to leap over gaps and all that stuff since their character can't jump and everything like that. It does take a bit of some getting used to in terms of the controls, from controlling your character and controlling the legions and using them in certain places and some in certain spots and all. I mean, for example, I was not a big fan with the control setup they have in the game, where you're using I believe it's the CR button to do a melee attack. I mean, I prefer when you hit mapping it to the Y button and all. I mean, luckily though, you do have customization to your controls, so you can adjust it if you want to and so forth. So, I mean, the controls, again, there is a bit of a learning curve, but I didn't feel like it was a huge turn-off or anything like that, but there is somewhat of a learning curve as far as the controls go in Astral Chain. Overall, though, I have to say, I'm definitely enjoying this game. The game has sort of the look, feel, and style that Platinum is well known for, all that stuff. The story is really good, so is the gameplay. So it's the gameplay and the graphics and the music, and it's definitely a fun and enjoyable game. Yes, I would have liked to see the game run at 60 frames per second, not 30, but I'm not losing complete sleep over it. And I will admit the controls, to a certain degree, have a bit of a learning curve to it, but not terrible or anything like that. Once I started figuring out everything started to click and so forth. So yes, there is some learning curve, but not hugely bad. But despite that, that wasn't enough to turn me away from playing this. This is definitely a fun game. I highly recommend people picking up, especially if you're a fan of Platinum, though. And it's something to play to keep you occupied as we wait for Bayonetta 3. Hopefully, we'll hear more about that information soon. Here's to hoping that we see more of the partnership with Nintendo and Platinum. I would love to see that continue. I know Platinum wants to, publish their own titles and so forth, and I understand that, but I would like to see them collaborate with Nintendo again, especially with games like Bayonetta, to Wonderful 101, to even Astral Chain. And here's to hoping, given the fact that you have one of the folks who worked on Nier Automata, here's to hoping it also they could convince Square Enix to, let Platinum bring Nier Automata over to the Switch. I think that would be a perfect fit for that title and so forth. So overall, I definitely think it's a must-buy. I definitely, maybe because I'm you could say I'm a Platinum fanboy or something like that, but it's definitely worth a pickup for the Nintendo Switch, especially if you're fans of, especially if you're fans of Bayonetta or Nier Automata or Platinum in general. Okay, before I end this video, I want to give my thoughts on a situation in regards of the situation with Spider-Man, and apparently we're now hearing he is back in the MCU, kind of, and all that stuff. Now, call me biased or anything like that, call me MCU fanboy or whatsoever, but I've been a fan of the MCU for quite some time, ever since the first film that came out in 2008. That was the first Iron Man movie, and I was very pleased when we started to learn that Spider-Man was going to be part of the MCU, when we started with the first one, Spider-Man Homecoming, and then just recently we just had Spider-Man Far From Home, which broke box office records to be exact. So I was kind of shocked to hear that Spider-Man was going to be out of the MCU after both Sony and Disney couldn't work out a deal. There were some allegations that Disney was being a little too greedy. There was allegation against Sony and all. Whatever the case was, I believe that both those two had to work something out. Although personally, I think, in my opinion, and call this an MCU fanboy comment, I personally think they should have just brought the rights back for Spider-Man and have him stay, in the MCU and so forth. Well, it seems as though they were able to work out some sort of deal, and apparently it looks like Spider-Man is back in the MCU, sort of, basically for one more film and possibly another appearance in a MCU film, although that could change and all that stuff. In an article published on The Hollywood Reporter, it reads, quote, "Spider-Man shocker, Disney, Sony strike a deal for one more movie." It reads, quote, "The two studios are once again working together with Tom Holland's hero set to star in a Sony film, there we go, a Sony film, okay, that was a little weird, okay, in a Sony film produced by Marvel, Kevin Feige, as well as in an MCU film. It's also worth pointing out that it's been reported that Kevin Feige is going to help out, or at least do a Star Wars film and all that stuff. That's going to be interesting to see. It reads, "After publicly parting way over a deal gone south, Disney and Marvel and Sony are back to the tables and have struck a deal that would see Marvel produce another Spider-Man film for Sony. The new film even has a release date, July 16th, 2021. John Watts, the filmmaker behind the previous two Spider-Man films, is in talk to direct, although it is reported, at least from Hollywood Reporter, that it's now reported that John Watts is returning to direct the film and all that stuff. So it appears as though that they basically got back on all that stuff. points out that, quote, it points out that supposedly Marvel will get to capitalize on the merchandise, but perhaps more importantly, gets to keep creative control over its most popular character, something it did not have during the years that saw the studio, then run by Amy Pascal, make critical maligned movies and thus protect the brand and all that stuff. So, to me, it seems as though that, from what I've been hearing, it looks like they got a new deal out of it. Disney will have, supposedly Disney was asking for 50% of control of it, but they got like 25%, so they sort of worked something out. And honestly, I'm glad that they worked something out, because seeing how the ending for Spider-Man Far From Home is, it left it as a cliffhanger, and it would be a real damn shame if the Spider-Man was out of the MCU and they didn't conclude that cliffhanger and all that stuff, or finish off, his trilogy and so forth. So I'm very glad that it sounds like Spider-Man is, at least for now, back in the MCU. Whether or not he stays in there in the near future, who knows? You know what my opinion about it is. I think he should stay in the MCU and so forth. And there's also reports coming out that we could see, Venom and all that stuff make their way into the MCU and so forth. So we'll have to wait and see how this all plays out and all. But right now, it seems as though Spider-Man, from the moment, is back in the MCU, and I'm very happy about that. Indeed, I'm looking forward to seeing the next Spider-Man movie, which supposedly has a 2021 date, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out and so forth. So overall, glad to see that he's back in the MCU. For now, my hope, and fingers crossed, is that he stays in the MCU for good. I know I don't have control over that and all that stuff, but I would love to see him stay in the MCU for good. Okay, this concludes my video review of Astral Chain for the Nintendo Switch, plus my thoughts on Spider-Man returning to the MCU, sort of, and all that stuff. And again, these are my opinion. What are yours? What are your thoughts about Astral Chain? Are you enjoying the game? Are you not enjoying the game? Do you think the visuals and the music look great? Do you think the story's good? Do you think the gameplay is enjoyable and fun? Are you bothered by the fact that the game is only at 30 frames per second, not 60 frames per second? Or is that not a big deal for you? Are the controls to you, are the controls sort of a little bit of a learning curve, or they're not that big of a learning curve at all? Excuse me 1 second. And what are your thoughts about Spider-Man basically back in the MCU for now, though? Do you think this is great news? Do you think that we could see him, maybe see more of him in the MCU? Would you like to see that happen? Do you agree with me in thinking that Disney should just find a way to get the rights back, the movie rights that is, back altogether, and have him stay in the MCU for good and all that stuff? Do you agree with what I said in this video? Do you disagree? Do you have a difference of opinion? As always, sound off on the comment section below. Let me know what you think, and I hope you hit that like button. I would appreciate it, and I hope you do subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do, make sure you hit the bell icon for notifications of any new videos I put up. Also, feel free to share this video if you want to, and feel free to donate to my channel if you like. You could do it through PayPal me or Patreon. Links will be in the description of this video. And I will see you again next time when I do another video. Hopefully that'll be soon. Until then, from Southern California, I wish you all a good day then. Bye!